Thanks to Maddie Laster for that awesome intro. I never thought I would see myself on such a cool thing. So we're glad to have you on for our Tusk Talk, man. We haven't been able to cut it up here in a couple weeks. I got Kevin McPherson on with me again. Kevin, glad that you're joining me today.
Good to be back with you, Brad.
Well, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. And one thing I wanted to show everybody is my hoodie here. Make Arkansas football great again. We're going to talk about how to do that today. Who they need to get to make Arkansas football great again. And, well, Kevin, I know that your expertise is basketball, but we know we can cut it up with football a little bit here. And Arkansas ended its football season with a whimper on Friday with a loss to Missouri, 24-14. And, you know, I want to say this first. I got to give a lot of credit to Barry Lunny and what he did. He came in a difficult circumstance. Guy showed his love for Arkansas, but they just didn't have a quarterback, man. I mean, it was pretty rough, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, the lack of a quarterback doesn't take an expert to know that Arkansas, that's been the position that has really had them chasing their tail. When you really look back at the last couple of seasons, in particular, the 2 seasons under Chad Morris, they just didn't have answers there. And you know, after seeing what Western Kentucky did to Arkansas, you go back and look at the problems Arkansas had. They came back with Arkansas's quarterback from last year and knocked Arkansas's head in. So I even wonder, was it as much about the quarterback talent as it was just a dysfunction in that program? And certainly not getting good quarterback play, no matter who it was. Was really, to me, the biggest weak spot and the weakest part of that chain. And I mean, Arkansas's won a total of 8 football games in the past 3 seasons. When you go back to Brett Bielema's final season, and I don't think you can say anything but, arguably the worst program in the Power 5 in that stretch. And once you establish a losing culture, especially playing in a league like the SEC, it's going to be hard to overcome it.
Arkansas's 1-23 in their last 24 SEC football games. They are 4-28 in their last 32 SEC football games. It's rough. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I'm going to give a little more kudos here to Jack Lindsey as well, though. Jack Lindsey come in, he fought. He did what your 5th-team quarterback should do. He come in and did everything that he could. Man, that hit he took at the end of the game where he basically got a helmet to the back of the neck. I thought, this kid's not going to get up. He gets up, and he runs the next play. And, of course, Arkansas replaced him at the end of the game with Ben Hicks, and I'm not sure exactly what that was about because Hicks wasn't going to do anything that Lindsey hasn't done already. It's interesting. In 30 attempts, and this is talking about the quarterback situation and where they are at Arkansas. In 30 attempts this year, Jack Lindsey threw 3 touchdown passes. Now, this is your 5th-team quarterback. The first quarterback that Arkansas trotted out was Ben Hicks. Ben Hicks had 137 attempts on the season. He had 2 touchdown passes. 2. I mean, we can say what we want about the coach. We can say what we want about offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, but you better have somebody that can play the quarterback position. And right now, Arkansas just doesn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, that was the biggest blind spot on the team among many. But I think, I really think, you look at the last couple of games and Lenny keeping things, somebody's got to coach the group. And I thought they did show a little bit more in terms of trying to compete. I think Morris had completely lost this team. And, that's how you end up losing like they did in those, that 4-game stretch there before he was relieved of duties. So at least there's that, if you want to say there's a silver lining. I'm not really big into moral victories especially when you look at just how bad things are. I mean, there's just not a lot. I mean, that was a Missouri team the other night that had really been struggling. And that both teams really needed a win. And of course, Arkansas. I was talking about how many games they've won in the last 3 years. What happens is once you've established this culture of losing, it's really hard to turn it around and find ways to win games, because here's the deal. You've got a team that doesn't know how to win. They don't know how to win. And even when things might be going right for you here and there, they're going to, winning football games at that level is not easy. And so any adversity, any time that, that things aren't going well for you in the course of a game, trying to find a way to win, if you don't know the feeling, if you don't have the experience in coming through and persevering and overcoming the adversity to stamp that W, it's hard to get over that mountaintop. And I think with this off season, whatever hire or whatever direction the program goes in, it's going to be tough, no matter who they hire, to turn that around. I mean, once you establish that level of losing, you've got players who are returning that literally don't know how to win football games. I know that sounds like it's dramatic, but when you think about that, you think about it conversely. When a team gets used to winning, sometimes just that confidence, just that air of knowing how to finish games, sometimes that's the difference when everything else is equal on the field. And I think it works in both ways. I think when you get used to losing, you find ways to lose, even when you may be in a game that you should have won or could have won. And there's no excuse for some of these losses they have, Brad. I mean, you can't lose to San Jose State. You can't lose to West Kentucky. So it's gotten so bad that I think it's a major this is not an easy fix. This isn't just a few things here and there. This is a big time renovation for the next guy.
Well, I'm going to have to. I agree with you to a certain extent, but I do think if you fix the quarterback situation, it looks a lot better. Now, what does that mean? That's the question. What was it, 12 years ago, 13 years ago now, Arkansas played in the SEC West Championship. So SEC Championship, won the SEC West Championship. So if you're talking about that, I absolutely agree with you. But I think if you fix the quarterback situation this year, I think they had an opportunity to do some things, get close to a bowl game, maybe not make it, maybe be 5-7, have something to build on. You've also got some studs with Trey Knox and Traylon Burks. Those two guys are somebody that you can absolutely build a passing game on. Questions about running back situation, what's that going to look like next year? As we expect that Rakeem Boyd will probably go to the NFL, and for all intents and purposes, he should. There's just, too much beating that a guy takes in the SEC and all that. But obviously, quarterback position, running back position, those are things that are not the only things that need to be fixed. The defense actually statistically, believe it or not, was worse than it was last year. And if you look at this 4-year stretch that I just referenced, where we had 3-29 or 4-28 or whatever it is in the SEC over the last 4 seasons, if you look at those seasons, 16, 17, 18, 19, what do those have in common, Kevin? Every one of those have historically bad defenses. Historically bad. And so, obviously, as much as they need to get a quarterback situation fixed, as much as they need to fix other things, the defense has got to be addressed, and it's got to be addressed right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Arkansas's got – and that's why I think the climb is steep. I don't think it was just quarterback play. Now, I get what you're saying, but Ty Story came in and owned Arkansas, and he was one of the quarterbacks last year on the team that won 2 games and couldn't win an SEC game, and he looked like an All-American. And I just wonder, it begs the question, if Nick Starkel was still at Texas A&M and found himself for some reason starting against Arkansas when they played this year, how good would he have looked? So, again, I'm not arguing that Arkansas had good quarterbacks. What I'm saying is I think the dysfunction permeated, and I don't think it was just about personnel. I think it was a combination of stuff, not something that Barry Lunny was going to be able to fix and make us forget in a couple of games. Although, again, I'll go back to there was some hope there in the competitive nature in the team that had been missing. But you're right, defense. Arkansas to recruit on that side of the ball the way that it needs to. You think that the next coach coming in is obviously going to have to address that. I mean, and I think when you're not doing well on offense, things can cave on you on that side of the ball as well. Arkansas really had a problem at times this year in time of possession because they could not sustain drives. Part of that was their best player, Rakeem Boyd. They couldn't get him enough touches. And I think a lot of the, just things sort of snowballed on them on that side of the ball. Then the defense was on the field a lot, giving up big plays. Arkansas could not seem to get off the field even when they get teams and behind the sticks, second and long, third and long. Teams would still find a way. We saw that with Missouri, picking up first downs, moving the chains, and then eventually scoring. And it's demoralizing. So is there one phase in football that Arkansas was good at in the last 3 years that stand out? I mean, their field goal kicker had some
moments.
He boomed some big ones here and there. But I can't think of any phase of the football game where Arkansas showed any sign of life relative to the schedule they were playing. This was as bad as it's been in the program history, and it's so all negative. Guess what? This next hire, whoever it is, and it seems like Lane Kiffin's that name, and we can talk about that. But whoever it is, Arkansas is probably, to me, a slow build back. I don't see a bowl game next season. But man, wouldn't I love to be surprised about to see something like that turn the fortunes that quickly and find a way to win at least 6 games.
It would be nice for sure. You hate to see a guy like Traylon Burks be wasted. I mean, this guy's he's like the next Darren McFadden type of guy at Arkansas, and you hate to see him wasted where his team doesn't go to a bowl game 2 out of 3 years or 3 out of 3 years possibly, because I don't expect him to be here past, his second year or his third year at Arkansas. I expect that he'll probably be one of those guys that'll be drafted. But, of course, success has a lot to do with that. So we'll see what happens. I've got a question here actually from Bill Harshaw. And I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple things before we get into who you think and who you like to be the next coach, and kind of if you can share anything about what you're hearing. But Bill Harshaw said, how's the recruiting class holding up, and are there any surprises? Now, I think he's talking about the football side of things, and I can answer that for Bill. It's not holding up well right now. I think they have 4 to 6 commitments right now, and at this point they don't have any surprises. Now, that being said, I think that they have an opportunity to get a few of those guys back, but obviously they're still playing behind the 8 ball a little bit. But when a new coach comes in, you're going to be talking about some new guys. I know of one that'll be on the radar for sure, almost definitely. Jacoby Criswell will be a guy that will be one of the first phone calls, I think, from the next head coach there at Morrilton. I believe that he'll be one of those guys. But right now it doesn't, it's not looking good for Arkansas, but that's to be, expected in that situation. Oh, Bill.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris Wells committed to North Carolina. You've got the running back at North Little Rock. Man, his name escaped me for a minute, but it's committed to Memphis.
Yeah.
I know Arkansas kind of slow played that situation, and there'll be some different looks at Arkansas guys. There's several guys around the state that I think will get a second look, and I think the state's not good enough talent-wise to support a winning program on the SEC level. But at the same time, there's good enough players in this state to be the foundation, and that's where it's got to start.
Right.
The focal point does have to start in Arkansas. I think that's always the case, and then you branch out to the footprint states and beyond if you can.
Well, there's a kid.
We'll see where that goes.
There's a kid right now that's committed to Ole Miss at Conway. Of course, Ole Miss now has had staff turnover as Matt Luke was fired. And so,
Right.
you wonder if somebody comes in and goes after a guy like that. I think there's a kid at Jonesboro, too, if I'm not mistaken, the same way. He's committed to Ole Miss. Now they've had staff turnover. Of course, Ole Miss is going to be going after the same guys Arkansas is. They're going to be same names, Lane Kiffin, the Mike Norvell is going to be a guy. Mike Leach. Those are all the guys that are going to be expected to be in the mix there. So it'll be interesting how that shakes out. But Arkansas does have some guys that have escaped the grasp of Chad Morris and that staff, where that they're going to go after some guys that when they come in, especially guys that have lost their head coach. So it'll be interesting. Of course, what you're going to probably see, and I think you can attest to this, Kevin, is that you're going to see some kids that are probably going to hold off now that may have decided that they were going to sign in December but may wait until February before they actually make that a final decision there, whether they're going to go to Arkansas or somewhere else, whether that be that they were interested in Arkansas and committed to Arkansas, or if they were committed elsewhere and their coaches left.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you have a coaching change. Recruiting is tough enough as it is, and when you've slid as much as Arkansas has backslid, and then now you're in the formal part of that chain. I mean, there's no more question: is this guy? How long is he going to be around? Is he going to make it? The sink was shipping. Arkansas made a decision, got out there first. I think that's advantageous. I think once this hire is made, last week I was hearing we could hear something as soon as today or Tuesday, and we'll see just how long it takes. But recruiting is such an important part of winning football games. It's obviously the most important part. At some point, it doesn't matter how good the X's and O's are. In this league, you're all the coaches are great in terms of being able to prepare for Saturday. Most of them are. So it's about players, and you've got to recruit. And Arkansas needs to make a good hire. They don't need to jump the gun on it, but at the same time, the sooner the better. Because you're right, there's other schools like Ole Miss that are going to have changes. You've got the other schools that have stability that are on top of their classes. Arkansas is always kind of playing from behind anyway in the SEC in recruiting. It'll be fascinating to see what they're able to cobble together in terms of a class. How many they actually sign early? I think you're right. Your point was there's probably going to have to wait more than they would have for February, but that may end up being a good thing actually. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Well, like I said, that there are going to be guys that are not even on the radar right now that whoever comes in has had on their radar. And, whether that be Lane Kiffin, whether that be Norvell, whether that be Justin Fuente, Mike Leach, whoever that is, there are always going to be guys. It happens every time that a coach jumps ship from one to the other. When we saw it with Chad Morris at SMU, where, guys like Mike Woods was a guy that jumped ship from SMU, and he's come in. He's been a productive player at Arkansas so far. That's going to happen at whoever it is that comes in. So let's just talk about this, Kevin. You said you had a little bit of information there that you thought it might have been today or Tuesday about who they named, or maybe a naming of somebody. Are you getting any sense about who it could be?
It seemed to me, it seems like it's been pointing toward Kiffin. But I don't, that's not my, he's not my favorite guy. We talked about the last time we were on. So it's not about me. I'm not going to have a say in it, obviously. If that's who it is, then all hands on deck, and everybody needs to, get behind the guy, like him or not, and hope that, that Arkansas starts winning some football games. But you know what? I think whoever, if you look at the short list, if you look at names that are out there, and you mentioned several of them there's no way you can't look at those names and see that Arkansas is looking at an upgrade initially. You want a guy that's obviously going to be able to fix things and turn them around quickly. Those are upgrade names. The ones you mentioned, they're all upgrades from where Arkansas has been. But do you have the right guy to build the program and sustain it? And that's the thing. And is that Lane Kiffin? I'm not crazy about Mike Leach either. Obviously Norvell's a guy that everything says that, Florida State, when you look at a pecking order, and I talked to someone that knows him and says, Arkansas and Florida State would be his top two, and there's a pecking order there, and I think Florida State would be his first choice. You start looking at guys like you mentioned Fuente, Matt Campbell. There's some opportunities for Arkansas to upgrade immediately. How does it look long term? Who sees in Arkansas a program that can compete for that top 3 or 4 in the league year in and year out? I think that's a mighty task. I really think it's a middle of the pack SEC type of program at best. I'm not saying you can't have years where, like Petrino showed. I'm just saying on the average, you're probably looking at a program that's really a middle of the pack program. It's definitely not the bottom of the pack, and that's where they are right now. So I think the names that are out there are going to be upgrades. I think they can work them back to that middle of the pack. Who's the right guy to build it, sustain it, and give them a chance to crack that top 4 more often than maybe I'm even giving it credit for now? Is there someone that has a vision for that? That's what I'm interested to see.
Well, they've shown that they can do that, and used to, you could count on Arkansas kind of jumping up there once out every 3 to 4 years. They'd be kind of close to that, possible SEC championship game. Arkansas has appeared in 3 SEC championship games, 1995, 2002, 2006. Also has come close in 1998, 2010. 2011, you could say they were close, although the best 2 teams in the country were in the same division with them that year. And so
they were third when they were ranked as high as third. And you make a good point. Here's the only thing I'll say. That was pre-Nick Saban.
Yeah.
When you go back to Arkansas' success, Alabama was down. And everyone knows that's the benchmark of what the SEC is, and they're not down anymore. Arkansas, this conference also added Texas A&M, joined Arkansas's division. We've seen where that's where Arkansas has been with that in the last 7 or 8 years since Petrino left. You're right, but that's my point. Even when you get the right guy in here, can you consistently be what Petrino did for 2 years? I don't even know if he could have continued and maintained that pace. I don't think he could have. But guess what? Arkansas did prove in those 2 years that they could be up in that conversation. So it'll be interesting to see, can they find the guy that can do that again?
Yeah, and it will be interesting. And I think that no matter what happens, I think you've got to you're going to have to start taking it as it is. And I know that, like you're saying, that you don't feel like that Arkansas can be much more than a middle of the pack team, maybe jumping up there in that top 4 every great once in a while. But when you look at things as it's about to shake out, so Arkansas is going to upgrade most likely in their coaching search. They are. But also Ole Miss is going to upgrade, and Missouri is going to upgrade. And so you got those 2 teams that are on your schedule every year. They're going to have better coaches than they had previously, so their programs are probably going to get better. Mississippi State is not far away from doing that very same thing, where they're probably going to go after somebody that's going to be an upgrade. And this thing is as brutal as it has ever been. I mean, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah, you know what? The hope for Arkansas is they push the right button this time, and some of these other teams go through some of what Arkansas has been through. And this is cyclical. You're not going to be awful forever. You're a middle of the pack SEC program in football that if you get the right guy, like we just said, there's maybe that guy finds, can string together a few seasons to change that narrative a little bit and really put Arkansas in that conversation. But you just got to hope. You're right. The SEC is always going to be a league when it comes to football. We've seen it in basketball now, but we know in football no one's going to sit back and accept losing or mediocrity. They're going to continue to turn through not just roster, but turn through coaches if that's what it takes.
Right.
So it's never going to be easy in the league, and that's what makes the league so exciting every weekend. Is because there really are no Saturdays off. I know we can now make the unfortunate jokes, except when you play Arkansas, no one wants to acknowledge that or admit it. That's what it's become, but it's not going to stay that way. I think Hunter Yurchek's the next hire is an upgrade. Arkansas is going to figure it out, even if it's not next year. where we see a huge improvement. But it, coming soon, I think Arkansas football will be competitive again, and it won't be a Saturday off for the rest of the SEC. With the obvious goals being to take it as far as it can go.
Well, the fact of the matter is Arkansas has become the Vanderbilt of the West. I mean, it's in fact, Arkansas is worse than Vanderbilt right now, which in my lifetime I never would have thought in a million years I would be able to say that Arkansas is worse than the Vanderbilt Commodores, but that's exactly where they're at right now with that poorest record that they've had. And, you see a lot of national pundits now they say, rank the job with Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Missouri. And many times those guys are ranking Arkansas below Ole Miss and below Missouri. And I just want to scream at them, shut up. That's not true. It's not right, because Arkansas has better facilities. They have better support. They have all of these good things that are going for them. Right now they just have had the wrong coaches in there. And I have said for a long time, Kevin, that the program doesn't make the man in a lot of cases, but the man makes the program. I mean, go all the way back to Bear Bryant in Alabama. Bear Bryant was at Alabama. He won a lot. Then they go through this wilderness where they're not winning that much, all the way down to where Mike Price is caught in the strip club doing whatever he's doing. And, they fired him before he even coached a game. And then they bring in Mike Shula, and he's terrible. Nick Saban comes in. He brings Alabama right back within 2 years. I always say that the program makes the man, not the man making the program. Now, does that mean that Nick Saban can come to Arkansas and do what he's done at Alabama? No, but I can guarantee you this, that if Nick Saban had ever been at Arkansas and been here at the time period that we're at right now, you wouldn't be looking at 4-28 in the SEC. So I think that there's obviously a little bit of a caveat there, but at the end of the day, if Arkansas makes a good hire, they are going to improve. Whether the rest of the league improves or not, Arkansas will be better and will be better off.
Yeah, and you go back to that, back to some of Houston Nutt's success. If you remember, before Shula, before Mike Price, it was Dennis Francione. Before that, it was Mike DeBose. I mean, before that, it was Gene Stallings, who did a good job there, and that's when Alabama got into hot water again and went on probation. But he won a national title, beat Miami in an undefeated season, and had some really strong Alabama teams. But after that, they were in that wilderness for a while. And that's what Arkansas, everything is cyclical. Can Saban live forever? Man, it's scary. From that Bill Belichick coaching tree, do those guys have some secret agreements with some, dark powers that we don't? I mean, these guys are they are the poster children for what a program should be in the NFL and in college football. Obviously, Alabama, 2 losses this year. They're out. Where they fell out of the top 5
right.
for one of the few times. That just doesn't happen. So Alabama's doing it right. There's a lot of teams in the SEC that have had consistent, sustained success, but even saying that, programs still have those fall-off points. For Arkansas, it's gotten to rock bottom. They're going to climb back up, and maybe some of these other programs that have been doing better for a while will stumble somewhere and they'll hit this spot. But Arkansas can't count on that, and they certainly can't hope that happens. They've got to go out and fix their own, and that's a tall task right now, Brad. That's what I'm saying. I know the next hire is an upgrade, but I think it's going to be a while before we see, unless they land some kind of a Petrino situation. But he came in with a culture that had not been a losing culture. He came in and inherited some good players. That's the whole thing when I talk about the losing culture too. Even when Arkansas went into Bielema, that you had 1 year of John L. Smith, and that was a down year. But you had a lot of players that were holdovers from Petrino's 2 big seasons before that. They didn't have sustained year after year major problems with the wheels coming off and sustained losing. That's what I think it's one of the hardest things in the culture is to fix. And the next guy, that's one of the biggest things to turn around immediately is that culture of losing.
Yeah, that's right. And I will say that there is a little bit of encouragement in the fact that I've heard some of the upperclassmen like DeJohn Harris, stepped in and said, look, no matter who the next coach is, let's have some buy-in, because apparently that's been the problem or one of the problems, I should say, with Chad Morris was there just wasn't any buy-in from the older players, from Bielema to Chad Morris. And so he stepped in and said, look, guys, just buy in, do what the coach says, let that guy, trust him, let him try to build a program here because, it cannot continue the way it's going. It's got to turn around. I mean, it is embarrassing for the program to have an 80,000-seat stadium and you can't put 30,000 people in it, and it goes, crap rolls downhill in a lot of ways. And that's what we've seen is that when it was so bad for so long that stuff rolled downhill, and now the fans are saying, I'm done with this. I'm not giving any more money. Well, that can only continue so long until it hurts all of the other programs as well, so they've got to get it right.
Yeah. Well, you could tell when you're in panic mode and desperation when you start hearing fans clamor for Houston Nutt.
Absolutely.
Well, and that's not a knock on Houston did a good job at Arkansas. He wasn't the guy that was going to get Arkansas to a level like a Petrino could get it to, or even when looking back on it now, probably Gus Malzahn probably could have elevated a little bit more from where Houston had it. But Houston did a good job at Arkansas. But he's obviously not somebody you would want to bring back after all of that, and him being in the booth now since things. We've heard the Houston Nutt song before and how it plays out, and he did some of the same things at Ole Miss that he did at Arkansas. But that's not building your program back up. That's not even a Band-Aid at this point. But it does show you the level of desperation of fans when that seems like a viable option.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get to basketball here in a minute. I want to break just a small bit of news. I don't know if this means anything at all, but Hayden Henry on the Twitterverse says that there's a 4 p.m. Meeting today for the players. So don't know if that means anything or not. It's kind of an odd timing considering that the season is over. There's no bowl game, that sort of thing. So there is a 4 p.m. meeting. We'll see what happens, see if anything comes from that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that they're going to make a hire announcement. It was Tuesday of last week when I had a couple of sources tell me it was looking like Monday or Tuesday of this week, and we'll see if it's Kiffin. I mean, that's what I think is probably likely if an announcement's coming. But who knows? I mean, there's some other good names out there. I just, I really think that Arkansas's got a chance. By making the cut and bait when they did on Morris, it gave them a chance to get some stuff behind the scenes done if they could do it. It certainly can't hurt if they can get someone announced now with this signing period, just less than 3 weeks away of getting some. I think was it the 18th or the 19th? It's coming up, and so you get somebody in here with some time maybe to get some momentum back on some guys. Hey, you might be able to get some guys back on board, maybe not for that part, but you're going to work them if they don't sign early with somebody else, and work them. And like you said, it may be that they really find out what they've got in February. That's probably where most of that hay is going to be made in recruiting. But man, if they can get a guy that excites the fan base and excites recruits, and that's what you hope for. You hope for the best possible landing on this hire because, man, the last two have just not worked out. And who would have thought Bielema would have ended as badly as he did when he was hired? I was never on board with Chad Morris. I can tell you that because I don't see how you go into a mid-major conference and bring a guy in that had a losing record overall, and his best season was 7 wins. I never thought that was a good idea. But Bielema, I actually thought at the time was going to be a good move for Arkansas, and we know now historically we can look back and see how the wheels started coming off at the end of his tenure. But now this next guy, man, this hire, Hunter Yurachek, basketball looks good. I know we're about to talk about that, but this could really solidify his legacy with his football hire. Arkansas fans are sure thirsty for a winner again. They need to make this one work.
Well, let's talk about a winner. Arkansas's got a 7-0 basketball team right now, and since we talked last, they've got a couple victories. They took a victory at Georgia Tech in unlikely fashion. Let's talk a little bit about that right there and kind of what they've been doing on the hardwood so far. They won last week or Saturday against Northern Kentucky, a Northern Kentucky team that I was there personally at Bud Walton. I didn't think they were a bad team at all just by looking at them. Of course, Arkansas played shorthanded without Mason Jones. Mason Jones, who hit the game winner against Georgia Tech. Kevin, from what I saw, and I'll let you take over here in just a second here, but from what I saw, without Jones, Arkansas is very shorthanded, and they've got to have all hands on deck if they're going to be successful this season.
Yeah, well, they're already Musselman does not play his bench. He's not a deep into the bench kind of coach as it is. But it really boils down to, for any team, but the way sports are now, you may have two or three guys that have potential for next level. Right now on Arkansas's roster, you've got one or two. And when one of those guys, when one of your all SEC type, all league type of players is out, and you're playing a good mid-major. Look, Northern Kentucky is a mid-major school. They've won the Horizon League the last 2 years. They've been to the NCAA tournament and the NIT in 3 consecutive seasons, twice in the NCAA tournament, including last year. Even though their coach was then promoted in basically a promotion, getting the job at Cincinnati. Darren Horn's a guy that's got SEC head coaching experience. Was 2-2 against Arkansas back when he was a head coach at South Carolina about a decade ago. So you look at a team like that coming in, you're without your best player, and then a guy like Isaiah Joe has an off shooting night, and Arkansas now has got a target on its back. Even more so. Anytime a mid-major comes in to play a high major, they're obviously looking. That high major's got a target. But I think Arkansas right now, with the start that they've had, games are going to get tougher. I looked at the schedule. They play Austin Peay tomorrow night, Brad, a 3-3 team. Austin Peay's a decent mid-major school out of the Ohio Valley Conference. But once you get outside of that, Arkansas, the last 5 of their non-conference opponents have a combined record right now of 29-7. Indiana's still undefeated. A couple of one-loss teams in TCU and Tulsa, who comes to Fayetteville soon. But the schedule in the non-conference actually picks up. It gets a little tougher. So you got to hope a guy like Mason Jones is back in the lineup soon, because you're right. A guy like him being out, or an Isaiah Joe or a Jimmy Witt, they're not using a lot of guys as it is. A Desi Seals, Reggie Chaney, who we saw they did fine without for 3 games. But I just don't think at this point, now that you're starting to get in the tougher part of the schedule, and as the season moves on, that you're gonna that you're gonna fare well with key guys missing. But yeah, Mason Jones, the leading scorer on the team. He's been the best player this season. The shot against Georgia Tech was the icing on the cake. That was what put him over the line to win that game, but he scored the final 10 points of that game. He had their last field goal in regulation. He had their only field goal in points of overtime. But he had their final 10 points. When you combine all of that, he's a guy that Arkansas is not going to win a lot of games if he's out of the lineup.
Yeah, they definitely looked like they were playing a little bit left-handed against Northern Kentucky without him in the lineup. He has been incredible this year so far, and looks like he's gotten his body in better shape than even it was last year. And of course, if you know the backstory about Jones, that he weighed like 265 pounds just a few years ago, and here he is now. He's got his body in great shape. He looks really good. His athleticism, he's not a real athletic player, but if I'm choosing a guy that I'm going to put the ball in his hands when it's time to get that last shot, he's proven more than one time here at Arkansas he's the guy that we need in the ball in his hands when it's that time.
Yeah, Arkansas last year too many times got caught with Jalen Harris with the ball in his hands in a win or die last possession situation. And really, that's playing left-handed, because we know he's not really a three-point shooter, so there's not a threat there. Defenses, basically, the strengths of his game telegraph what he's probably going to try to do, so defenses can kind of play. So it was good to see at Georgia Tech, Arkansas, in that last possession. Not only did Musselman not take a timeout, but the ball stayed in the hands of Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe, your 2 best offensive players, who both can score at all 3 levels, and that's what you want. You want to be in that situation. Mason Jones last year hit a back down bucket in the final minute was really the final points of the game, and the game winner against LSU. a team that ended up winning the SEC that last year, and it was ranked. Hit a 1 of 2 against Indiana at home at the free throw line in the last couple of seconds, make the first, intentionally miss the second. So yeah, he's got some clutch in the clutch gene there, and he's a guy that you definitely want. I'm also confident with Isaiah Joe, but I think those two guys, even Jimmy Witt, I could see a guy. His free throw shooting obviously is not the percentage you wanted at, but I think he's a guy that could maybe deliver you. But you're right. There's not a lot of options for Arkansas to turn to on this team to put you on the back and carry you. But having 3 guys of those that I just mentioned, I think if any one of those guys is not in the lineup for an entire game, Arkansas is going to struggle to win that game. And if it's a good mid-major, we know when they get in the SEC that's going to be the case because it's a really good basketball conference now. And they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle because of lack of depth and size on that front line. There's going to be a lot of games that are going to look like what we've seen so far against mid-major competition. The Georgia Tech game really demonstrated. Arkansas got beat on the glass in that game, Brad, by 15. They were minus 15, 35-20. Arkansas was able to win the turnover battle. They forced 23 turnovers, but Arkansas started kicking the ball around late in that game, just like Georgia Tech was. And so they were much of the game they were plus 10 in turnovers. They ended up only plus 7, and that was one of the reasons why they just couldn't score the ball, because they got into a situation where not only were they missing shots, they couldn't even finish the possession out to get a shot because they were having some careless turnovers. And I think that starts happening the more guys have to play minutes. That's why things snowball when you're already got a philosophy of not playing a ton of guys. Now you've got guys out and guys are planning to play more minutes, or you're in a tight game situation, so guys have to play extended minutes. I think as the season wears on, let's see if this is a team that when you get to the final third of the season and the shooting's not been great anyway, what are the legs showing you? What are the percentages looking like? Are they able to maintain that intensity on defense? To me, the defensive side now is the identity of the team. And so a lot of question marks, even though they're 7-0. We haven't even talked about that's the best start in 20 years,
yeah.
22 years, Brad. You have to go back to Nolan Richardson in 1997, 98. That team started 8-0. But it's hard to win basketball games. That's the proof there. And there are some question marks, but there's no doubt a guy like Mason Jones being out, that's a question mark you don't want to have beyond this one game if they can help it.
Well, let's talk about another guy that you just mentioned, Jimmy Witt. Where would Arkansas be without the addition of Jimmy Witt? He has been huge for the Razorbacks so far.
They'd probably have a couple of losses, right? I mean, he's had 2 career-high games. South Dakota, but in their previous last home game, and then they went on the road to Georgia Tech. He struggled a little bit in that game shooting the ball, but then they come back to Fayetteville and another 24. He repeats that career high. So the last 2 games at Bud Walton, he's had career high in points, and he's just a guy. He's a throwback kind of player. You don't see he's not attempted a 3-point shot. That's not part of his game, but he's not just a slasher either. He can actually do a lot of things in the mid-range. He can back guys down and turn around and knock down that little 8 to 12 footer. That's a tough shot. That's an old school shot. Guys like Alex English and Adrian Dantley and different players from that I remember from the 80s were the guys that were they weren't crazy athletic. They weren't necessarily bigger than the guy that was guarding, but they just knew they had crafty ways that they found to score the basketball. He can drive right or left and pull up and knock down, effective from, 15 to 17 feet sometime. And then he's a guy that we've seen him tip the basketball in. He's got great arm length on that 6'3" frame. But just to find an array of ways to score the basketball. He's been about a 2 out of 3 from the free throw line. If you look at that shot, I mean, I can't understand even how he's, making 2 out of every 10 attempts, but he's managing to get, 67% in there. That you'd like that to be a little bit better because a guy like him's going to get fouled because the more that you attack that basket, the more that you're going to get the benefit of the doubt on some whistles. But yeah, I think Arkansas is lucky to have him. I mean, this is another piece that Eric Musselman, when you look at that 5-man class that he signed, from the transfer portal market. Connor Vanover obviously would be helping this team. He's not playing this year. I think J.D. Note, I've heard good things about him in practice. We knew he was going to have to sit out, the guard that's transferred in from Jacksonville. But when you look at John Tilsilla, here's a guy that's not really even able to stay on the floor right now. He's really struggled playing up at this level. But I think Jimmy Witt on the flip side of that has been outstanding. And here's a guy that's really playing fringe all-league type of performance so far because of the rebounding and his ability to help the team score when the perimeter shots aren't falling. And Arkansas has struggled from three.
Yeah, they have. That's been actually a surprising thing for me, is that I figured that they would actually be a little bit better from three than they are. I mean, they're shooting, 24%, something like that, from three-point range, yet still able to win ball games without a true center, without any kind of real inside presence going on. It's been truly amazing so far with what they have done and being able to win ball games with so many deficiencies. I mean, the three-point shot should have been one of their strengths, and it just hasn't been. So anyway, we'll see what goes on there. But Kevin, let me get to this. We actually had a question from Lance Watts, and he asked me, he said, can we talk about Kyrie Walker? Where is Arkansas with Kyrie Walker right now?
Yeah, so the updates aren't any different than they have been. I mean, he likes Arkansas. He's trying to get his high school core requirements met so that he can start taking visits, and if he's going to play college basketball, that's what he's going to have to do. He's also got some options. The NBA G League might be an option for him. Playing overseas might be an option. China's been talked about, but there's nothing new here until he announces a list of schools he's going to visit. It's not necessarily just when he decides to do it. When he decides to do it, it's probably predicated by meeting the requirements necessary to be able to do those things. And I don't think he's gotten there yet. I don't want to speak to that in specifics. I just know that he's still working toward that. And so here we are. We've turned the page to December, a midterm edition. In the next few weeks, you would think something like that would shake out and we'd know more. But as of now, he's still working toward that. He'll get on Twitter and social media and put out some teasers. But I think he's getting closer to getting that figured out. And if college is an option for him, I think Arkansas is at the top of the list. There's probably 4 schools that he's going to put at the top of that list and maybe take visits to. But I think Arkansas will definitely get a visit if he gets to that point where college is an option. I think if Arkansas obviously has that scholarship available, that would be a strong. That'd probably be the front runner for his landing spot. Put it that way. But I'll say this also: we're going to see. We see it every year now. The transfer portal. You're going to see some names at any moment now with guys making decisions to leave their situation and get in the transfer portal. And I will not put it past Eric Musselman to utilize that here in mid-season, whether it's Kyrie Walker getting his stuff figured out, whether there's another high school player that decides to reclass because they can graduate here soon and they decide, and Arkansas gets in on that, or even through the transfer portal. And you got to remember, if they hit that transfer portal now and bring somebody in at semester, that player is not going to be eligible to play right away. They're going to have to sit out. But it goes back to the way Musselman recruits. I don't think we should ever think that Arkansas has finished recruiting because that portal's active. We see a lot of guys unhappy at midterm and leave their schools. We saw it last year with Jordan Phillips coming out of Arkansas, a guy that missed the first few games injured and missed most of the preseason with injuries and just didn't work out for him. He transferred at midterm, and so I think this portal situation will definitely be in play for Arkansas if a guy like Kyrie Walker, if they're not able to get something worked out there. Look for Arkansas to be kicking tires here in the month of December. Whether or not they actually get somebody and sign them is one thing, but I don't think it's going to be for a lack of looking.
I think you're right. I mean, where else can I go with that? I think you're right. Since we have talked, Arkansas has also gotten two major commitments from two high major guys that we have touched on in Jalen Williams and KK Robinson. Talk about those guys.
Yeah, Jalen Williams just, this weekend, through the holiday week, Fort Smith Northside was in a tournament in Tournament of Champions in Washington, Illinois, and some really good teams and players up there. And Jalen Williams went head-to-head against a 5-star North Carolina signee. He signed in the early period, top 15 rated player, Mark Kessler, a 7'1", skilled forward center. Like I said, he's already inked with North Carolina. Those guys went head-to-head, and Jalen Williams hung 33 points on him. Was 3 or 4 from 3. Had several plays where he posted up, sealed the guy, and was just too quick. The guy couldn't guard him. And Kessler only had 6 points going into the fourth quarter. I'll give him credit. He scored 10 in the fourth quarter, and it was a back-and-forth game. Woodward Academy out of Georgia. Some really good players on that team, but Kessler the shot he made in the final minute ended up being the game winner. And so the team won by a point, but Jalen Williams got the best of that head-to-head matchup. Williams finished with 33 points and 11 rebounds. Kessler was credited with the 16 points he scored. They gave him 10 rebounds. I didn't see it, and they gave him 6 blocks. I certainly didn't see that. But Jalen Williams dominated that matchup, and that's a 5-star. So Arkansas gets a commitment from him a week ago Saturday, and he goes out and has a statement game like that. Here's the concern I have with guys that didn't sign. Devontae Davis, the only guy that signed in the early period. You got Moses Moody, Jalen Williams, and then Kalen K.K. Robinson on Thanksgiving Day, all committing to Arkansas in the last couple of weeks now. But you only had one of the guys that signed, and so when a guy like Jalen Williams puts up a game like that against a 5-star, do you think these other schools are going to really stop recruiting him? Because the ink's not dry. There's no letter of intent that's been signed to take him officially off the market. So Arkansas, although they want their recruits and their committed guys to have great seasons and show that well, they've got to be constantly looking at situations like that, going, well, double-edged sword. That opens up eyes nationally, and as well it should. It's good for Jalen Williams, great game, and but you look at 6'10". He's a skilled guy, soft hands, smart basketball player. He's a volume rebounder. He's more than an adequate rim protector. He's not a big bouncy guy, but man, you just love his basketball IQ. He can handle left and right. He can actually bring the ball up off a rebound like a guard. He can do just a lot of stuff. A great passer. I don't want to be too dramatic about this stuff, but I've watched the guy enough. This guy's got a chance to be a really good college basketball player.
And Arkansas is going to be set up at the point guard spot, in a spot that Arkansas has just had lots of trouble with for several years now. It looks like they've got 2 guys that are going to be fully capable of being high Division I players and really make a difference there at the point guard spot.
Yeah. Well, Devontae Davis was the first one off the board, a big point guard at 6'4". His court awareness is, I'm not going to say that it's elite, but it's a plus part of his arsenal, because he's a kind of guy that in transition is just a dynamic playmaker. But he puts passes on guys that, I say it like this. There's not a lot of guys in basketball that can beat my eyes and what I see coming. He's a guy that a handful of times has beaten my eyes, meaning he made the play before I saw it coming. Usually I'm yelling and make the play now, or thinking it, yelling in my head, make that pass now. You dribble too much. But he's a guy that can get his own too. I mean, he's just great in the open court. He's kind of got that swag and it factor when he's on the basketball court. And he and Jalen Williams, they went head to head a couple of weekends ago here in Central Arkansas in the Hooping for Hoodies, a game that went to double overtime. He had 24 points in that game and scored the final 4 points of regulation just to get it to overtime. And Jacksonville ended up beating Fort Smith Northside and Jalen Williams. Both young men had great games that night, but Devontae Davis really had his full game. He had 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals, but he can really impact a game. Probably needs to focus on the defensive end a little more than he has. He's got all the tools, great arm length and long legs too, and quick for a guy that's lanky like that, and probably could be a plus defender. And then you switch over, and I said a lot about him. Kalen K.K. Robinson has been really good out at Oak Hill Academy since going out there for his senior season. He battled through some injuries, was close to a triple-double in an exhibition game against a junior college team. And he also had He had a double-double. He was an MVP of another game in a showcase game. So he's already had some good moments out at Oak Hill. But I think KK is the best two-way player in the statement in defense, offense, and I think he's probably in the top 30, 25 to 30 in the country when you look at a two-way player. Now, all these guys are ranked in the national top 100. But Kalen KK Robinson is more of a combo guard. He's not a natural point guard, but defensively he can guard the one better than any point guard I've seen. And that's the thing about him. It gets hard for guys to turn and get north and south on him. I've never seen a guy block so many shots. We see Jimmy Witt blocking shots at that one spot. Well, Kalen KK Robinson, a couple inches shorter, blocks them all the time in a variety of ways, and he gets a lot of steals. He sets a defense, Brad. He makes your defense. Starting at the one spot, you've got a guy that you can build your defense around. On offense, he's made himself into better than an efficient three-point shooter. When you look at his numbers on Nike YBL circuit back in the spring, he was a 43+% three-point shooter. So that's knocking it down. And he's a good slasher. He's going to make the right plays as a passer. He's a guy that can complement. That's why Moses Moody likes playing with him. He's a guy that he doesn't have to be all about him and building his playmaking around his own shot. He actually does what's required and necessary. He plays the game the right way. So you're right. There's two guys that are capable of coming in and helping run the team. And I think defensively, too, we see that the identity of this current Razorback team is on the defensive end. Look at a guy like Kalen KK Robinson comes in as someone that's a guy that brings that to the table immediately for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
All right, Kevin, we're going to circle right back around to the football coaching search real quick as we get out of here. And, Kevin, again, thank you for joining us. Tell me, I figure by this time next week, when we're talking Tusk Talk, we're going to be talking about a coach, whoever it might be. If you had to make your prediction right now about who it would be, who would you say it's going to be?
Oh, goodness. I've said Kiffin's name too much not to stay with that. That's not my preference. And I could be wrong on that. And certainly nobody's told me that's going to happen, but that's what I think.
Now, you keep saying it's not your preference. Who was your preference again? I can't remember the last time we talked.
I didn't really have one. There were just guys that I'm not crazy about. He's one of them. Leach is another guy I'm not that crazy about. I'm more of a Norvell Campbell leaning kind of guy, but I'm not sold on anybody that's been mentioned I'm not 100% sold on anybody that's been mentioned as a viable candidate at this point.
I remember you said Josh Heupel. You'd mentioned him as a possibility. I haven't heard his name brought up at all. Then, of course, there's always the Mike Gundy reference. Every time Arkansas has a coaching a vacancy, then Mike Gundy is the one that is usually mentioned. I don't think he's being mentioned right now, but who knows? Who knows what will end up happening in the end? Gundy has done a pretty good job there at Oklahoma State, and probably a similar job in the Big 12, maybe a little bit higher ranked than what Arkansas is in the SEC, but similar jobs nonetheless. Well, Kevin, again, we appreciate you joining us on this Tusk Talk. And like I said, next week we'll probably be talking about a coach and be talking about some Razorback games and no telling what else that comes along between now and next Monday.
Good to be with you, Brad. Looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Kevin McPherson he's the Arkansas Hoop Scoop there on Twitter. You can follow him at hogville.net, KARK. He's always there providing great information on the basketball front, and he's got some connections on the football side as well, and has been giving me some stuff here and there about the coaching situation at Arkansas. So, well, this is the end of Tusk Talk for now, so we will say goodbye, and we will see you next Monday at 2 p.m.